Hello, darling. As I've said before, I'm personally a skeptic when it comes to paranormal claims, though I acknowledge that things happen in life which we struggle to explain. Even so, I absolutely adore ghost stories, and one of my favorite types are stories about ghosts that appear on the road. Vanishing hitchhikers, ghost cars, and the like are all beloved by me. Maybe it's because they tend to stick a regular person with the ghost in a place far from home, with no one else around to see or help. And tonight's story borrows from just this genre of tale. I hope you will enjoy Night Drive. It was a long drive home. Nigel had been on the main motorway for hours. The city gave way to countryside, the heavy traffic to periodic lorries, the day to the night. It was with some relief that he turned off onto the local county roads, where the traffic was even lesser, though there was always the risk posed by animals. Still, he preferred cruising through this more familiar territory, past homes and farms that had been there long before he was born and were sure to outlive him. The street reduced to just 2 paved lanes, quiet and simple. His companions now were old stone walls, ancient trees, and the warm golden light from an occasional diamond-paned window. The world stood at the boundary between winter and spring. Snow still clung to the dark recesses, where it was met by frost each morning, and the buds had not yet appeared on branches, but the ice was gone, and the nights often brought rain. Now, as Nigel drove on, the rain came again, light but bitterly cold. He should have slowed as he raced along the winding tarmac, been more mindful of the impact on sudden stops, showed special caution around corners as he rushed past hedges and gates, but he did not. He was nearly home. He left the quaint country houses behind and needed only to pass through a heavy woodland on this, the final leg of his journey. It was very dark now, the rain tapping against his roof and windscreen as loud as the clomping of hooves on cobblestones. He was descending Cobnett Hill Road, where visibility was poor, especially at night, especially in the rain, and where many accidents had happened across the years. The winding descent had slowed him, but he sped up again as he approached the straightaway. This was when a woman emerged from the trees on his right, rushing across the road. She was illuminated brilliantly by the glare of Nigel's headlights. She turned to look at him in mid-stride. Her face was whited out by the glare of the lamps, such that Nigel could not see her features clearly. His only impression was that her eyes were too wide, too open, maybe with shock or with fear, he couldn't say. She wore some type of black top, maybe a turtleneck, and a white mini dress and boots. Over this she wore a white plastic Mac raincoat, which she held shut and pressed tightly against herself. And though Nigel had only a second to register it, he was also aware of the woman's blonde hair pushed back by a hairband. Then she was under the car. Nigel felt it clearly as the wheels went over her body, the front, then the back. The weight must have crushed her, pushing her down into the soft earth on the unpaved stretch of road that encircled the hill. He hit the brakes, but it was too late. He'd already struck her. She'd already gone under. It was already done. His car, an old 1998 Mondeo in blue, with power windows that no longer worked, skidded to a halt, sliding a bit in the mud, stopping just short of where the tarmac resumed. And Nigel simply sat there for several minutes, his hands on the steering wheel, motionless aside from his breathing, blinking, and a repetitive squeezing then releasing of the wheel, which he did over and over. He was breathing so hard and so fast that he began to fog up the windows. "You've done it now, Nigel, old thing," he said to himself. "You just went and killed a girl." No, he couldn't have done, he thought. It was impossible. He was still a few miles from town. How could some young woman be walking out here alone, in the cold and rain so late at night? Stepping out of the trees into the middle of the road, it made no sense. Especially looking like that, like she'd just come out of a Soho nightclub in the 1960s. Nigel remembered when he was very young, and his older sister and her friends had gotten all tarted up to go dancing. Back when everyone was afraid of Bible John, they looked like that, in their mini dresses and their plastic Macs. Nigel wondered, might he have started to doze off and then dreamt it? Didn't that make a great deal more sense than this strange girl, stepping into a dirt lane in the middle of the woods in the middle of the night? He wanted it to, but he wasn't sure. There was, of course, one simple way of settling the matter. He had to get out of the car and look. The rain had picked up, so had the wind. He imagined the girl under his car. It was horrible to think of her down there, dead, her eyes wide open in surprise. Yet it was so much worse to imagine her alive, partially crushed, trapped, desperate, in pain, wondering why he was just sitting there, why he did not exit the vehicle to check on her, why he did not go for help. Only then for it to gradually dawn upon her that he was stalling for time, waiting for her to die so she could never tell her story. Because isn't that what he was doing, just in case she had somehow lived? When Nigel was a boy, there had been a girl who lived down the lane from him in his village, Glynis. They didn't socialize because she was quite a bit younger than he was, but he knew her all her life. When Nigel was old enough to drive on his own, but Glynis was still a child riding her bicycle. She was killed one summer while crossing the street by a man who'd been speeding. Nigel had driven past just in time to see the aftermath. Glynis had still been in the street, and he'd seen her face before they covered her. He remembered the long, red, jagged line going down the center of her face, and it haunted him forever after that. For he always wondered if it had been blood that had trickled down, or if her poor little face had actually cracked open. What a horror! The driver had gone to prison for it, and Nigel had been pleased. But now here he was, the shoe on the other foot. If the girl was real, if she was real. But then Nigel thought, no, it wasn't the same. Poor Glynis had done nothing wrong. But if the girl tonight was real, then she had behaved recklessly. What sort of fool darts out into the middle of a road in the middle of the night, without first checking to see if a car is coming? What reason could she possibly have for rushing across the road like that, when there was nothing on the other side but more forest and a steep drop-off? What an incredibly stupid and dangerous thing to do. It didn't mean that she deserved to be crushed under a moving car, of course not. But surely her recklessness, her foolishness, was a mitigating, if not exculpatory circumstance for poor Nigel. Perhaps he had been driving too fast, especially considering the weather, the darkness, the late hour. Yet it was totally unreasonable to think that a girl would suddenly dash into the road in such a remote and unlikely place. It was something that no one could ever predict. This young woman, if she existed, had played a part in her own demise, unlike poor Glynis so long ago. Again the thought came, go out and check, that's the only way to know. But he couldn't bring himself to, at least not yet. He was still sat there, gripping and ungripping the wheel, unable to steady his breathing, unable to calm his racing heart. There was little traffic on this road, especially at night, but if he waited long enough, another car would come, in time. And the people in that car would see what he could not. They would know if there was a girl, dead or dying, underneath his blue Mondeo. They would stop, surely, to check on her and him alike. They would know at once what had happened, that he had struck and killed her, and they would hold him there until the authorities came. What would Nigel do all that time? Would he speak to them? Would he confess? Or would he remain as he was in that moment, frozen, staring forward, fidgeting, shaking, sweating, and quiet? He wasn't sure. There would be nothing he could say or do to make it right, to show them that he was not a monster. Because he was a monster now. He was a monster for hitting her, and he was doubly a monster for letting precious moments pass like this, selfishly focused on himself. It would only be so much worse by the time the next car came by. In fact, he was worse than a monster. He was a murderer, and beyond that he was a thief as well, for he had stolen from that young woman all the best years of her life, and then stolen the few minutes he might have used to try to save her. Yet there was no changing it now, no matter what he did. If he remained in the car, doors locked, refusing to move or speak for anyone but the police, it wouldn't alter the outcome for him or for her. But it might spare him the sight of her crumpled body beneath his wheels. He realized that sight was what he wished to avoid most of all. He was not a cruel man. He just knew that sight, that memory, would never leave his mind's eye so long as he lived. No matter what they did to him, what punishment he received, it would pale in comparison to seeing that. If he saw the girl, stared into her dead eyes, then she would have him, and she would never release him, and he couldn't live with that. He thought again of his older sister. She had looked so pretty, beautiful even, when she had gone dancing with her friends so long ago. Nigel had never been close to his sister. They'd gotten on well, but the age difference between them was severe. They both grew up more like only children than like children with siblings. But imagining her now, dead from cancer these past 5 years, if she'd been cut down in her prime and never had the chance to grow up, to grow old, that was more than his heart could take. He began to weep, not for himself, not for his sister, but for the girl under his car, for all that was taken from her. So now he could no longer rationalize. He could no longer wait. If the image stayed with him forever, haunting him, punishing him, then so be it. It was the least he deserved. But he had to know now if she was there, because it was his responsibility to know, so that he could act. It was still raining. The second he opened the door, He was touched by the icy drops and by the bitterly cold wind that carried them. His headlights provided a shrinking cone of light ahead, but to the side of the car, even just a few feet away, was nothing but darkness. That was what he faced. Cold, wet darkness, and it was terrifying. It felt elemental, primeval, like he was facing darkness or death itself. Yet what did that compare to what the young woman had faced through no fault of her own? Nigel stepped out onto the gravel, feeling and hearing it crunch beneath his trainers. The raindrops hitting the roof of the Mondeo were so much louder out here, like stabs, like accusatory pokes. He was on the verge of hyperventilating as he lowered himself, first to his swollen knees, then to all fours. He had no flashlight, but still, he was sure he'd be able to see if there was a girl, alive or dead, intact or crushed, beneath the car. He would see her, smell her blood, smell death. He gave his eyes a moment to adjust to the darkness as he whimpered softly to himself. And then he saw there was nothing under the car. He could see the scars in the gravel from where he had skidded to his sudden stop, but that was all. Grunting, he rose to his feet and checked the front bumper. There was no dent, no blood, nothing. Then he ran around to all sides, nearly frantic now, then a few yards back up the slope, certain that at any moment he would see her crumpled, broken form. He checked the weeds and brush to either side of the road as well, though he knew he had clearly seen her go under the car, not thrown to either side. But again, he found nothing. His legs were shaking, rubbery, as he got back into the Mondeo. He was soaked now and freezing, but his face was hot, his lips quivering. Once he was sitting again in the driver's seat, he found that he could not stop one foot tapping incessantly. He knew what he had seen. He had not been drinking that night. He did not do drugs, and he had not been dreaming. The girl, blonde, in her white plastic Mac, had stepped out of the past and into the path of his speeding car. She'd gone under. He'd felt her little body pass under the wheels, front and back. It would have killed her, or nearly done. But now he was alone on the dark road. She was not there. Why did that make it worse, when it should have made it all better? The car had been running all this time, and Nigel noted he was low on petrol now. He released the brake, and the car began to roll forward again. As it did so, he craned his neck to look behind him. He checked the mirrors as he moved. He was certain with each glance that he would see her body lying there, that somehow the angle had been perfect to conceal her from him before. But no, there was nothing. Just the gravel road, tinted red by his taillights, retreating away from him into the dark. He did not immediately go home. Instead, he drove to the next village over and stopped at a petrol station. It wasn't to fill up, but to use the nearby payphone. "Bayham Valley Police," said a female voice, sounding perfectly awake and professional despite the hour. "Please just listen to what I have to say," Nigel said. He didn't like the way his own voice sounded, barely like himself, broken and small and very strange, crazy. "I was just coming down Cobnut Hill Road, south, about a mile before the turnoff to the village, and I hit a girl with my car. I know I did. I felt it. I saw her go under the car, but when I got out to check, I couldn't find her. Please, you've got to send someone up there to find her. I'm so worried she's out there wandering around, hurt in this weather. The female voice, perfectly calm and rational, said, "Sir, forgive me what may seem a rude question, but is this a sincere report, or simply a tall tale about the Cobnard Hill ghost? Nigel froze for a moment, taken aback by her question. What? Please understand, the woman said. We can't send officers out there to satisfy a joke. We get maybe 10 calls like this a year. So again, I ask you, is this a sincere report, or are you trying to sell me a story about the ghost? Nigel said nothing. Sir, she said again. She began to repeat her question, but he hung up the phone before she could finish. From the local Ashford edition of the Kentish Express, published October 20th, 1967. Girl dies after row, 3 injured. 3 Ashford women were injured and 1 killed following an accident on Cobnard Hill Road Tuesday night after the vehicle in which they were riding, a 1962 Ford Cortina, went over the embankment about a mile north of the Bayham interchange. The car plummeted down the forested hillside, flipping multiple times before coming to rest in the ravine 30 feet below. The driver, Lavinia Downs, aged 22, was pinned behind the steering wheel and suffered a fractured right arm. Her 2 backseat passengers, Arabella Smith, aged 20, and Georgina Percy, aged 23, suffered only minor injuries. They were able to exit the vehicle and seek help nearby. However, front seat passenger Violet Collins, aged 21, was ejected from the vehicle and died at the scene from her injuries. The initial investigation suggests the girls were not drinking. Statements made by the passengers indicate that an argument had erupted between Miss Downs and Miss Collins over which route to take to a party they planned to attend that night. The argument escalated as the ride went on, and this, combined with excessive speed and freezing rain, was the likely cause of the accident. My inspiration for this story is the ghost of Bluebell Hill, one of the most well-known road ghosts of southeastern England. If you've never heard of it, give it a search here on YouTube. There are many videos about it, both long and short, that examine the stories, interview witnesses, and also explore the potential origins of the supposed ghost. Tonight's tale was not especially long nor especially deep. I hope you don't mind. This was just an itch I've been wanting to scratch for a while. Have you ever met a ghost on the road? If so, I'd love to hear about it. So far, at least, I haven't had the pleasure. Until next time, don't forget me. N'est-ce pas?